Before I start, I just want to say a quick thank you. I think everyone underestimates how much effort there is to put together and organize an event like this. And I think, when you see Igor out there in the foyer area, make sure you go and say thank you to him. He's if you don't know who he is, he's the one that's stressed out out there, right, trying to bring all of this together. And he's got a lot of help through people like Jill and also people like Carmel as well. So I just want to say a big shout out to bring the community together, because it's really important. It's important to bring like-minded minds together to talk about these types of things and to bring these events together. And it's been a really hard couple of years. Yeah, I don't need to tell you that, do I? It's been a really tough couple of years. So remember to go out there and say thank you. Thank you to Igor. Thank you to the staff that volunteer to run this event. And I think that'll go a really long way. But I'm looking forward to catching up with all of you after this and having a beer. So without further ado, sort your shift left out. Well, I'll tell you where I came up with that after I formally introduced myself. So I work for a security company. I'm an engineer. I'm a security lover. I'm an architect. And I work for a small company called Lacework. And if you'd like to know more about what we do, feel free, come and have a chat to me. You can follow me at your own peril on Twitter. And I really do mean that, follow me on your own peril on Twitter. Or otherwise, we can share code together on GitHub. I love to collaborate over code. It's one of the most inspiring things for me to do. Now, this is a little bit of a story. I'm going to take you on a little bit of a story today. We're going to tell a bit of a story. We're going to, well, maybe we'll have a few laughs. Maybe we won't. We'll see. We'll see if you're in the mood or not, right? Need you all to get a little bit more woken up. It's 4:30, right? And it's almost beer o'clock too. So, but before we had DevOps, we had chaos, didn't we? No, of course we didn't. Right? It wasn't chaos. I'm old enough to remember. I'm well and truly old enough to remember pre-DevOps and the way that we used to run projects and the way that we used to operate as a whole. Now, I think the big differences that we see between now and what we used to do is that the projects back in those days were enormous. They were huge. We would bite off enormous pieces of work and then try to get them delivered in a 1.5, 2 year, 3 year project, right? There was none of this thin slicing, incremental delivery, fail fast, right? Failing wasn't an option. You couldn't use the word failure, right? You weren't allowed to use the word failure, which is wrong. We know that's wrong. But this picture here, does anyone actually know where that picture has been taken from? Anyone want to hazard a guess? Yeah, it's Woodstock, right? It's Woodstock. It's where they tore the tower down, right? It was complete chaos. If you haven't watched some of the Woodstock documentaries, I think there's a few on Netflix and things like that. You should definitely go and watch it. It's very interesting. But before we had DevOps, and then we started to move into that whole, let's bring operations and development together. Let's bring down the wall, right? Let's bring them all together. And we came to keeping the whole music theme going, right? There's a theme, it's music, right? Yeah, you with me? Everyone still with me? Still awake? Excellent. Then we started to bring, a little bit like Aerosmith and Run DMC, where they brought together, the early days. Does anyone know the song? What was the song they did? Walk This Way, yeah, thank you. All right, at least someone's awake. All right, someone's awake out there, excellent. And we brought together the development team and the operations team. We got them together. The journey continued, right? But it wasn't over. Why wasn't it over? It wasn't over because we had so much more to do. Just getting those two teams to be able to have a conversation with each other, or at least, go to lunch together, maybe even form a 2-pizza team. All right, let's not go too far. But we brought them together, and as part of that whole journey, we then got DevSecOps, all right, or SecDevOps, or however you want to portray it. But the fundamental reason here is that we wanted to bring together all of these disparate groups, okay? We had to bring them together. It was the only way that we were going to survive as a group, as an IT organizational movement, was to bring together those three fundamental pieces and then continue to collect groups along the way. It doesn't stop with DevSecOps. It's a direction that we're heading in, and we need to bring even more together, right? We need to bring all of these groups together. And so I was thinking about all of these different ideals that we've got now, right? Shift left. I picked on, I'll be honest with you, right? Let me be honest with you. I picked shift left because it worked within the title, right? It kind of sounded like I was swearing, but I really wasn't swearing. Yeah, I do swear. I swear a lot. But it worked within the title. But there's just so many different terms that we've got out there. Yeah, does anyone in their organization play bullshit bingo? Yeah, where you get the bingo card and then you tick it off when you're in a meeting and you hear someone say the word microservices, agile, shift left, right, Docker, okay? And then once you get to containers, Kates / Kubernetes, whichever one you want to use, once you've ticked off all of those on your bingo card, right, then of course you yell out bingo, right, during the meeting. In the middle of the meeting, you yell that out. You're like, bingo, I got there first, right, yes. And it's really great fun if you haven't played it before. It's also a really good way to get everyone to, interested in the meeting and to listen too, because you have to listen, because you don't hear the word, you're going to miss it, you're going to lose, okay? So, but that whole premise of why I put this together was that in the world where I'm talking to lots of different organizations and lots of different people, some of the words that people use, they truly don't understand the meaning. They don't understand fundamentally where it came from. Why should it be important to them? Why should they be considering it? And even looking at those types of concepts, which are words that I've put up on the screen here, how are you going to implement them within your organization or an organization at scale, right? Or let alone a big enterprise that's out there. And that's when I really started to think about this whole concept. What does the actual principle of it mean? And its definition, if you go and Google it, there's a couple of different definitions out there, but the one that seems to come up the most is that the principle of shift left is to take a task that's traditionally done at a later stage. I probably should have underlined later. And at a later stage of the process, and perform that task at earlier stages. So I was thinking about that. I was thinking about it quite a lot. Where do we apply it? How do we apply it? How is it different when we do that in large organizations? How much harder is it within large organizations? Can I apply it to other things that are not IT related? I was like, maybe I could. So I sat down one night, and my daughter was sitting at the table, and we were eating dinner together. And as she always does, she looked at her plate of food and she started pushing the peas around. And I said, sweetheart, let's try something. We've got this concept. So Daddy works in IT, sweetheart. And we got this concept and it's called shift left. And she was like, oh, really? That sounds interesting. How does that work, Daddy? No, she didn't say that. Of course she didn't say that, right? She looked at me, her eyes glazed over. I think she rolled her eyes, right? She's like, oh, for goodness sake, here he goes again, right? And so I said, yeah, look, it's called shift left. The whole concept, the whole pretense of it is you eat the peas first, right? And you get rid of the peas off your plate, because I know you don't like them. And then after you've eaten those peas, then you can go off and you can do all of the other things, right? And eat all of the other things that you want to do. She looked at me, picked up her knife and fork, put it straight into the piece of steak that was in front of her and began to eat the piece of steak. And I said, okay, that obviously hasn't worked very well. What if Daddy gives you a Roblox voucher? Will you eat the peas for me? Absolutely. She said, you ate the peas. So I was like, great, okay, excellent. We've now worked out in order to get or to encourage teams, especially in large enterprise organizations like 10-year-olds, you need to bribe them, okay? Bribery is always going to be that key, okay? It's the fundamental piece of the pie that you need to go to get someone to change towards a shift left method. You need to think differently. You have to think differently. It's all about thinking differently. And so I tried to instill that in my 10-year-old, and as you know, I failed miserably, right? I failed miserably, but we tried, and maybe we did it once, and she didn't want to try it again, but at least she tried. Okay, that's the great part about this. But we've got to think differently. So as an organization, as an enterprise, as a group of developers, ops, and security specialists, we've got to think about the way that we're doing things. We need to talk about the solutions, collaborate with the people. And by doing that, we need to fundamentally think differently as a group. When you look at all of the big organizations that have implemented amazing change over the years, the coin think differently really comes from the Steve Jobs era. Has anyone read the autobiography book of Steve Jobs? Got a couple in here. Excellent. It's really, really interesting. It's aged fairly well. You've read it, so yeah, agree. It ages pretty well. It's definitely a good read, isn't it? And it was all about think differently. Think differently was that fundamental piece at the end of the day. So in terms of thinking differently and moving towards that DevOps mindset, what does the industry say at the moment? So we've had a couple of presenters today talk about the DORA State of DevOps report, and it's a fantastic read. If you haven't downloaded it, go and download it. Have a read of it. It's super interesting. The issue that I have predominantly with it is that it's not exactly APAC focused. It's not exactly Australia, New Zealand focused. So it's hard to be able to compare yourself to what's happening over in the US or /EMEA, right? It's a little bit difficult to get that kind of insights. But I'll get to there in a second. Some of the interesting stats, or the big stats that kind of stood out at me in the 2021 report, was really the frequency of code deploy. That frequency of code deploy is kind of that heart and soul, what everyone comes back to, of how much quicker can we get our changes out. If something goes wrong, how quick can we then redeploy it out? That's really what it's coming down to. How quickly can we push things through our pipelines? And what's our change failure rate? So are we actually getting better at what we do? The only way you know that is if you measure it, right? So it all starts with measurement at the end of the day. You've got to go and measure, make sure you're measuring the right things. That's an important thing to do, obviously. And then how much quicker can you recover if something does go wrong, okay? That's another important stat. The other interesting area too, and like I said before, it's probably skewed a little bit away from the Australia, New Zealand stats, but I'll share some of those in a minute, is really the use of containers and how we're moving towards that container-based environment, especially in a production-based deployment. And you can see there by that graph that comes straight out of it that there's a lot of movement towards containers, which is nice. I like that. It's something that I support and something that I agree with. Along with, of course, the public cloud and multiple public cloud scenarios. Everyone would agree here that people are moving towards it, and the whole COVID pandemic started to help that, or to push, especially those enterprises that were maybe not looking to move so quickly. But what about in Australia and New Zealand? Do we have any stats floating around? And the answer is yes, we do. And I'm happy to share this report. I'm just going to grab a couple of interesting ones out of there. They're interesting, but there's also a couple of funny ones as well, right? So we'll take a look at them. We looked at a number of different organizations. So you can see the organization size, everything from greater than 2,000 employees, right down to our small 0 to 49. So your little startups as well. And then, of course, the area of IT that the people were completing the survey from. So a little bit of a mixed bag there as well. Then we asked them a set of questions. We started off with probably one of the first big questions. It was, well, what's your release frequency? How often are you releasing? Now, I don't know about you, but that 2% that never release anything, how do I get a job there, right? As an engineer, how do I get a job at a place that I never have to release anything into production? That's where I want to work, right? So, yep. But there you go, right?
How happy you should be with seeing your work out there and all this stuff, and you never release.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm pretty happy we put my feet up on the desk, I'll be honest with you, right? Beer in the hand, never have to release anything. Anyway, I digress, it's a joke. But that release frequency is quite interesting, especially when we're only looking at Australia, New Zealand-based data. So people from both of those countries replying to this particular survey. Have you experienced a shift left within your company? Okay, so yeah, look, there's a number of them that are going through major change, which was good. 11%, we have no plan for security to shift left at all. 11%. Kind of interesting. Okay, interesting stat there. That might change pretty quickly over the next 6 months. We'll wait and see. This one was really not a surprise to me at all. So what are the main obstacles preventing, slowing, or stalling your DevSecOps initiatives? Of course, budget. It's probably got a little bit worse as well as things have tightened up in the economy. So nothing really standing out too much there. Then, of course, in your organization, which group is primarily responsible for security? So for this questionnaire here, I can just imagine everyone who was answering this one. They were like, I just want to get one right in this survey. Who is responsible for security in your organization? Is this a trick question, mate? Security is responsible for security in our organization. Yes, got one, right? 100% on that question. Yeah, so 43% thought that security was. We were probably looking for more of an all of the above. You know, let's all get together, DevSecOps, Kumbaya, etc. We didn't get that, unfortunately, but you know, maybe we were targeting you know, Australia and New Zealand, and we're very literal in the way that we respond to things. Do you believe that current security is an inhibitor in your organization's DevOps agility? Yes. 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 Interesting. Interesting. So, how can we improve our shift left? How can we improve the way that we do things? How can we do that? You know, what are some of the techniques that we can go and use? What are some of the things that we can go and leverage? What's out there for us to go and be able to use? How can we do things better? Well, I'm glad you asked. Let me tell you, there's a number of different ways. This is only some of them. I've only got a few minutes to go through some of these, but these are some of my favorites. So let's go through my list of favorites. If you're looking within the container world, if you are leveraging Kubernetes at the moment, and I know a lot of people are. In fact, most of the customers that I speak to are all leveraging cloud-based services around container orchestration. Absolutely. One area you definitely want to take a look at and have a look at a framework around the 4 Cs. Okay, it really does center and help you to be able to think about it in terms of the layers that you should be looking at and should be concentrating on. So everything from your cloud-based layer, the metadata platform that runs your cloud. I don't particularly mind which cloud you're on. It doesn't matter. Think about how you're looking at the metadata layer of that and how you are thinking about it from a security-based perspective. Is it secure? The cluster, think about your clusters. Deploy your clusters in line with the recommendations of the industry that are out there. Do the same with the container and also the code that runs within them. It's the 4 Cs. All right, look at those. And it's a really great reading. It won't take you long, but it has some fantastic recommendations. And it's available free for you to be able to go and read out there. The other area, which is one that's often overlooked, is that all 3 of the major cloud platforms, they give you recommended standards that you should go and follow. I think sometimes we read these and then we kind of forget because work gets in the way and we have to go and deliver things quickly. And sometimes we just kind of forget to go back and think about what we've developed and what we've written, and then tie it back to the architected frameworks, the recommended well-architected frameworks, for example, from AWS, or the Google Cloud Architecture Framework, which is a great one to go and read as well. And they also have really specific items to think about depending on which one of the cloud platforms that you're working on. In fact, no matter which one you're working on, you should look at all three of them because they can all help you regardless of what particular platform you're running on. It's an excellent place to go and get started and have a look and even go and learn some more as well. So what exactly are the best in the industry doing at the moment? What are some of the best and fastest moving organizations out there using? What techniques are they leveraging? Well, there's been a couple of talks already today that have spoken about infrastructure as code scanners. IAC is definitely an important one. I mean, our previous presenter was from HashiCorp. Now, it doesn't matter whether you're using infrastructure as code, such as Terraform from HashiCorp, or whether you're leveraging CloudFormation, or whether you're using Bicep, or any of the other plethora of fantastic IAC tools that are out there. Just be really careful about the way that you describe to utilize and create the resources that you're looking to be able to do. You can inadvertently create a security hole that can be rinsed and repeated across your entire organization really, really quickly. Okay, it can be dangerous. Make sure that you're doing all of the proper reviews. Get someone to review the pull request, okay? Use infrastructure as code scanners to look at the way that you've defined that code. Make sure that it's meeting best practices. Tie it back to the well-architected review framework that we just spoke about. It's in your interest to make sure that the code that you produce now is creating secure resources that are going to then go and run in your environment for a period of time. It's less work for you to go and manage. That brings me to cloud compliance as code. With your compliance environments, write them as code, define them as code so that they can be run continuously across your platform. Who's held to industry standards here within their organization? Who's got industry? Yep, so there's a few of you that are out there. There's a number of different industry standards that are out there. Those industry standards range everything from Center for Internet Security to NIST to health industry standards like HIPAA over in the US. They can all be turned into code and they can be run against your environment to save you time, but also to make sure that you're compliant over time as well. You're not just compliant today because the auditor's in having lunch with you, right? You're also compliant on Friday, all of next week, the week after, because as soon as you are not, you know very well that there's organizations out there that are testing the environments that you create. And if you are not vigilant about that, if you are not looking for CVEs on your platform, if you're not looking for misconfigurations on your platform, they'll find a way in. You don't want to be the one that's on the front page of the newspaper, do you? So think about that very carefully. This one here is one that I see quite a lot in the industry, quite a lot. There's a lot of fantastic help out there on the web, right? A lot of fantastic help. And you know, I've been just as guilty as anyone else of using Stack Overflow and maybe not checking out the code as much as I possibly should. Yeah? You've got to be really careful. Stack Overflow produced some amazing intel into the usage of their site. In fact, 1 out of every 4 users who visits a Stack Overflow question to get a resolution for a problem they're having copies something within 5 minutes of hitting the page. Now, when you look at how many copies that adds up to, it's quite insane, right? It's quite scary, actually. Do you think that a lot of the developers are checking that code to make sure that it's doing what they think it's doing and not doing something inadvertent? Yeah, they're not, right? Again, there's a lot of helpful websites out there. There's a lot of community websites that are helping us as well. Just do your due diligence, test the code, make sure it's doing exactly what you think it is before you go and put it into your dev environments, or let alone any of your other upper environments, especially through a CI/CD pipeline. We can proliferate those changes so quickly these days. You've just got to be careful. Now, cloud logs. Cloud logs are a bit of a pain, right? Especially these days, they're producing so much information. There's some really great systems out there to be able to ingest that information and to also visualize that information. And it's a really great way to be able to get real-time insights into what's happening at any point in time within your particular cloud environment. And you can do it across multiple accounts as well. So it's a really quick way to get that information and visualize it. Leverage cloud logs off Google Cloud, leverage activity log, use your WAF2, use your CloudTrail. It's in your interest to make sure that they're switched on, number one. The amount of customers that I speak to and they don't even have these enabled. If something was to go wrong, where would you even start to go and investigate? Make sure you've got it switched on. It's a very small price to pay on your cloud platform should something go wrong, and you have to work out why it went wrong and investigate that. Now, because there's so much Kubernetes that's going on out there, there's some really great and interesting ways to be able to control those environments. Okay, now we all know that your image repositories, of course, the older they become, the images that are sitting there, the more unhygienic they become. It's going to become an issue. It's going to bite you at some particular stage. But using a combination of reviewing, of course, those images, those containers that are being built, the images that are sitting there as part of your image repo growing old over time, that will help you. But also leveraging something like an admission controller to be able to have a set of your organization's policies that will stop a particular container from being sent into any of your production environments or any of your lower environments that don't meet the strict and stringent regulations of what you're trying to achieve to secure your environment. It's a really easy way to protect yourself. And you can do it via policy as code, right? You can easily update it. It's collaborative, it's maintainable. It's a really quick and easy way to be able to do it. And there's just so many organizations out there not taking advantage of admission controllers and other techniques like that. You should definitely go and have a look at it. That leads me sort of backwards within that build pipeline back to the container vulnerability piece. So many organizations are not looking at the CVEs, the packages, even the static code analysis of what's running within those particular environments. Making sure, of course, that the code that you've copied off the web is okay for you to be able to run. You need to analyze that on a regular basis. Make sure that the code is safe to run in your environments. Check and make sure that the CVEs that are within your image repositories and know which one of those are in your runtime environment. Think about the priorities in your head, right? If you've got running containers that are public facing, they're your highest priority. Make sure that they're the safest ones. Then move back to just your standard running containers that may also be internal. And then anything which is not currently running at the moment, you can probably sleep safe at night for the moment. We'll see. Okay, but that's really the hierarchy that you want to think about in that vulnerability management piece. And that goes right across to getting that visibility in your runtime. That also ties back to the logs that we're talking about. All of these things are interconnected. Turn your logs on, switch your logs on. Kubernetes audit logs is another great way to be able to gather information and insights into your running environments. Couple that with logs off the cloud platform, couple that with some web application information, and you've really started to get somewhere in your investigation pieces. All of these things are really tightly coupled in terms of how you should go about securing your environment. Think about the quality of the code that you're writing. Think about using vulnerability scanners not only at build time, but also get runtime visibility correlation as well. It's not enough to just have scanned here, but to also know what's not running in your environment. If something goes wrong, it's going to happen in the running environment. You need to have details about that and then have information which is tightly coupled to what was running of what you built. All of these things flow through together. And then the last piece of it always comes back to the people in your organization. Invest in your people and you'll have a secure environment that is scalable as well. I hope you enjoyed that. That's the end of day one for us today. You made it. It's almost beer time, yeah? What do you reckon? We'll go and get a beer? All right, thank you very much, everyone.